The cold mountain air wrapped around me as I stepped off the ski lift, my boots sinking into the fresh snow. I took a deep breath, letting the crisp air burn my lungs as I surveyed the endless peaks stretching into the horizon. This trip was meant to be a fresh start, a chance for Amber and me to reconnect without the distractions of our everyday lives. I had spent weeks planning every detail, picking this remote mountain resort because it promised adventure, untouched slopes, and breathtaking views. It was supposed to be an escape, a return to the excitement we used to share. While you're here, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know. Amber had seemed excited at first, her eyes lighting up at the thought of a romantic getaway. But as the days passed, her enthusiasm faded. The first morning, she had joined me on the slopes, laughing as she wobbled down the easier runs. By midday, she was complaining that her boots were too tight, her legs were sore, and the wind was too cold. By the second day, she opted to stay inside the lodge. "I think I'll just relax today," she had said that morning, adjusting her scarf while sipping a hot chocolate. "You go ahead and have fun. I might check out the spa, or we'll take a walk around town." Something about the way she said it nagged at me, but I shook it off. Amber never really enjoyed skiing as much as I did. Maybe I had been selfish in thinking she'd love it just because I did. So I let it go, kissed her on the forehead, and headed up the mountain alone. After a full afternoon on the slopes, I made my way back to the lodge, exhausted but exhilarated. The warmth of the massive stone fireplace in the grand hall was a welcome contrast to the biting cold outside. I scanned the room, expecting to find Amber curled up in one of the leather chairs, a book in her hands. But she wasn't there. Instead, my eyes landed on her across the room, standing by the bar, deep in conversation with someone else. He was tall, rugged, and wore the resort's signature guide jacket, the kind reserved for employees who led guests on off-trail excursions. His name tag read Ryan. Amber's hand lightly touched his arm as she laughed at something he said, her body angled toward him in a way that made my stomach twist. For a moment, I stood frozen, watching, trying to tell myself it was nothing. She was just being friendly. But something about the way she tilted her head, the way she leaned in just a little too much, set off a quiet alarm in my head. I forced myself to stay calm as I walked over, sliding an arm around her waist. "Hey," I greeted her, my voice casual. "How was your day?" She smiled, but there was something off, just the slightest flicker of hesitation before she answered. "Oh, great. I went to town for a bit, did some shopping. Then Ryan was telling me about some of the hidden spots around here. Apparently, there's a secret hot spring that not many people know about. Isn't that cool?" Ryan nodded, offering me an easy grin. "Yeah, it's a beautiful spot. Totally off the beaten path, but worth the hike." I studied him, searching for any sign of something beneath the surface. His expression was friendly, open, but I didn't trust it. "Sounds interesting," I said, keeping my voice even. "Maybe we can check it out together." Amber hesitated just for a second before nodding. "Yeah, maybe." That hesitation was small, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. Later that night, back in our suite, I brought up the hot spring again. "So, when are we going to check out that hidden spot Ryan was talking about?" Amber stretched, feigning a yawn. "I don't know, babe. I was thinking of just taking it easy tomorrow. You can go if you want, though." There was again that dismissive tone, like she wanted me to be anywhere but with her. I forced myself to smile and nod. "Maybe I will." She kissed my cheek absent-mindedly before heading into the bathroom, humming softly to herself. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closed door, the unease in my gut growing. Something wasn't right. Amber had been distant before, but this felt different. It was subtle, tiny shifts in her behavior, brief hesitations, the way she suddenly seemed preoccupied when I spoke to her. I lay in bed that night, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing, try to shake the feeling creeping on my spine. I didn't have proof. Not yet. I would find out. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. The sheets beside me were cold, and for a moment, I thought Amber had gone to the bathroom. But the room was silent except for the faint hum of the heating system. I pushed back the covers and checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. My watch read 7:23 a.m. Amber wasn't an early riser, Not unless she had a reason to be. I got dressed and stepped out onto the balcony, looking down at the snow-covered grounds of the resort. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting a pinkish glow over the mountains. A few skiers were already making their way toward the lifts, bundled up against the morning cold. But Amber wasn't among them. A nagging feeling settled in my gut. I grabbed my jacket and headed downstairs, making my way to the lobby. The front desk attendant, a young woman with a warm smile, greeted me. "Good morning, Mr. Dawson. Did you need anything? Have you seen my wife this morning?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She hesitated for the briefest moment before answering. "I believe she left early with one of our guides. Ryan, I think. They took one of the resort's snowmobiles out toward the trails." My jaw tightened. Did she say where they were going? "I'm not sure, but I could check the log for you." She tapped a few keys on her computer, then nodded. "It looks like they were headed toward the South Ridge. It's a popular spot for private tours." "Private? Of course." I forced a smile. "Thanks." As I turned away, my mind raced. Amber had never mentioned taking a tour. If she wanted to go, why wouldn't she have asked me to come along? And why Ryan? I stepped outside, the cold biting through my jacket. The snowmobiles were lined up near the rental shack, but there was no sign of Amber or Ryan. I needed to clear my head, so I did the one thing that always helped. I hit the slopes. For the next 2 hours, I threw myself into skiing, carving my way down the mountain with precise, aggressive turns. But no matter how fast I went, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my chest. At noon, I decided to head back. Maybe Amber had returned, and this was all in my head. Maybe she had simply wanted to surprise me with something special. But when I got back to the lodge, she was still nowhere to be found. I grabbed a coffee and settled into one of the oversized chairs by the fireplace, watching guests come and go. My knee bounced restlessly as I checked my phone again. Finally, at 12:47 p.m., a message from Amber popped up. "Amber, hey babe, just got back. Took a little morning adventure. Can't wait to tell you about it." A little morning adventure. I stared at the words, my grip tightening around my phone. I texted back, "Where are you now?" "Amber, at the spa. Just getting a massage. Figured I'd relax after all that hiking." Hiking? She had said she went on a snowmobile ride. My stomach twisted. I stood up and headed for the spa. The receptionist greeted me as I walked in. "Hi, I'm looking for my wife." "Amber Dawson?" She checked the appointment book. "She's in a session now. Should be done in about 30 minutes. "Thanks." I turned and walked out, my mind spinning. She was lying. I didn't know why, but I was sure of it now. I waited in the lobby, watching the clock. When Amber finally walked in, her hair slightly damp from the steam room, she smiled as if nothing was wrong. "Hey," she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "You should have come with me." The massage was amazing. I forced a smile. "Maybe next time." "So, how was your morning?" She stretched, letting out a content sigh. "Incredible. Ryan took me on this insane snowmobile ride, and then we hiked to this hidden hot spring. It was beautiful, like something out of a movie. I wish you could have seen it." There was again. She had changed her story. First, it was a ride, then it was hiking. "Hot spring, huh?" I said, keeping my voice light. "Did you take any pictures?" She hesitated. "No, I didn't want to get my phone wet. But trust me, it was breathtaking." Lies. She took my arm. "Come on, let's grab some lunch. I'm starving." I let her pull me toward the restaurant, but my mind was already working, piecing things together. That night, after Amber had fallen asleep, I sat in bed scrolling through the resort's website. The South Ridge. Private tours. Hot springs. I needed answers, and I was going to get them. The next morning, Amber was up early again. This time, I woke up as she moved around the room, slipping into a pair of sleek black leggings and a fitted thermal top. She caught my gaze in the mirror and smiled. "Morning, sleepyhead. I didn't want to wake you." I forced a yawn. "What's the plan today?" She sat on the edge of the bed, tying her boots. "Just heading out for some yoga and then maybe another hike." "Yesterday was incredible." "Another one?" I asked, feigning casual curiosity. Amber nodded. "Ryan said there's another hot spring even more secluded than the last one. Figured I'd check it out while you hit the slopes." My chest tightened. She was meeting him again. There was no hesitation in her voice, no second thought about ditching me for some secret adventure. I forced a lazy grin. Sounds nice. Maybe I'll join you this time. She paused for the briefest moment before shaking her head. It's a tough hike, babe. And you wanted to get in more skiing, right? I don't want to throw off your plans. There was that little push to keep me in my lane, to keep me out of hers. I smiled and nodded, watching as she grabbed her gloves and kissed my forehead. I'll be back by noon. Love you. Love you too, I said, but my voice felt hollow. As soon as the door shut behind her, I got up and threw on my clothes. It was time to stop guessing. I needed to know exactly what was going on. I left the room and headed straight for the resort's activity desk. A young guy named Mark greeted me. Hey, what can I do for you? I leaned on the counter. I was wondering if you could check something for me. My wife booked a tour with Ryan this morning. I just want to know which trail they were heading to. Mark hesitated. I'm not sure I can share guest schedules. I gave him a knowing look. Come on, man. I just want to surprise her. He chuckled and tapped at his keyboard. Looks like they took the West Trail. It's a restricted area, not on the usual maps. Of course it was. I thanked him and headed outside. If Amber was sneaking off somewhere private with Ryan, I was going to see it for myself. I rented a snowmobile and made my way toward the West Trail, weaving through the towering pines. The cold air bit at my face, but I barely noticed. My mind was too focused, running through every possible scenario of what I was about to find. After about 20 minutes, I spotted something ahead, a pair of fresh tracks veering off the main trail. I cut my engine and followed them on foot, my boots crunching in the untouched snow. The path wound through dense trees, leading me higher up the mountain. Then, through the trees, I saw them. Amber and Ryan stood beside a steaming natural hot spring, their voices carrying softly through the crisp air. I couldn't make out their words, but I didn't need to. The way she laughed, the way she reached out to touch his arm, it was enough. I clenched my fists, my breath coming in slow, measured exhales. I could have stormed in right then and there, but something held me back. I wanted proof. Solid, undeniable proof. That's when I spotted a small, weathered sign nailed to a nearby tree. Protected wildlife area, cameras in use. I stepped back, my heart pounding. There were cameras here. I didn't need to confront them now. I just needed to find the footage. I turned and walked away, my pulse steady. Amber had no idea, and that was exactly how I wanted it. I spent the rest of the morning back at the lodge, sipping coffee in the lounge and pretending like everything was normal. Amber returned right on time, brushing the snow off her jacket as she walked up to me, cheeks flushed from the cold. Miss me? She asked with a grin. I smiled back, forcing myself to look relaxed. Of course. How was the hike? Amazing, she said, pulling off her gloves. You would have loved it. The hot spring was even better than yesterday's. I swear, you should come with me next time. I sipped my coffee, my stomach twisting at how effortlessly she lied. Maybe I will. She kissed my cheek and flopped into the seat across from me. How was skiing? Great, I lied just as smoothly. Went down a couple of runs, took it easy. Amber nodded, completely unaware that I'd followed her that morning, that I had stood just a few dozen yards away, watching as she laughed with another man. But knowing wasn't enough. I needed proof. After lunch, Amber went to take a nap, and I made my move. I walked through the resort's main hall, searching for any sign of someone who might know about those wildlife cameras. It wasn't long before I found a sign for the Conservation and Research Office tucked near the back of the building. I knocked on the door, and a middle-aged man with glasses and a thick flannel shirt answered. Can I help you? Hey, sorry to bother you, I said, leaning in slightly. I heard you guys place cameras out by the hot springs to track wildlife. He nodded. Yeah, we have motion sensor cams near some of the protected areas, trying to make sure people aren't disturbing the natural ecosystem. Right, of course, I said. So, do you ever catch people wandering in places they shouldn't? The man frowned. More often than we'd like. Why do you ask? I exhaled, pretending to hesitate. Look, I was out on the West Trail this morning and saw some people heading into a restricted area. I just wanted to make sure they weren't doing anything that could harm the environment. His expression darkened. That's a serious concern. He turned back toward his desk. We review our footage regularly. If there was any activity out there, we'll find it. I held my breath as he pulled up the files on his monitor. The screen flickered to life, showing black and white footage from the previous day. Snow-covered trees. The edge of the hot spring. Then movement. Amber. She stepped into frame, looking around before motioning for Ryan to follow. The two of them waded into the steaming water, their heads close together, their bodies barely visible through the mist. The researcher squinted at the screen. "Well, that's definitely not a bear," he muttered. My hands curled into fists at my sides. There it was. Proof. He sighed and shook his head. "Looks like a couple sneaking in. We can report this to the resort, maybe issue a fine." I forced myself to stay calm. Would it be possible to get a copy of that footage? I know the owner of the resort. He's a family friend. I'd like to make sure he's aware of this. The man hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, if it helps protect the area." He clicked a few buttons, and within minutes, I had the clip saved on a flash drive. I slipped it into my pocket, my heart pounding with adrenaline. "Thanks. You've been a big help." He nodded. "Hope it helps. People need to respect these places." "Oh," I said, heading for the door. "I'll make sure they do." As I walked back to our room, I felt a cold, calculated calm settle over me. Amber had no idea what was coming. She'd spent the last few days lying to my face. Now it was my turn. I slid the flash drive into my pocket and took a slow, measured breath. Proof. I had it now. Undeniable and indisputable. But I couldn't just throw it in Amber's face. Not yet. If she was willing to lie so easily, to look me in the eyes and pretend like nothing had happened, I needed to make sure my next move was precise. While I returned to our room, Amber was sitting on the bed, flipping through her phone. She looked up and smiled. "Hey, babe, where'd you go?" "Just walked around the resort for a bit," I said, shrugging off my jacket. "Figure I'd check out the conservation office, see if they had any cool exhibits." Amber nodded absently, not even slightly concerned. "Sounds fun." I forced a smile. "Yeah, it was interesting." She stood up and stretched. "Hey, how about we go out tonight? A little fancy dinner to celebrate the trip?" I watched her closely, searching for a crack in the facade, but she looked completely at ease. The same woman I had known for years. Except now I knew the truth. "Yeah," I said. "That sounds perfect." While she showered, I sat on the edge of the bed, turning my plan over in my mind. Confronting her outright wouldn't be enough. She would deny, deflect, make excuses. I needed to take this slow, let her believe she was still in control while I pulled the ground out from under her. At dinner, Amber looked radiant, sipping a glass of wine and laughing at something the waiter said. "You seem quiet tonight," she noted, tilting her head. "Just enjoying the night," I replied. Taking it all in. She smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "This trip has been amazing. I think we should do something like this every year." I nearly laughed at the audacity of it. "Yeah," I said, swirling my drink. "Maybe next time we should do something really different. Like a big event. Something for the whole community." Amber raised an eyebrow. "A big event?" "Yeah," I said, watching her reaction carefully. "Actually, the resort owner was telling me they want to do a conservation fundraiser. Something to raise awareness about the environment, bring people together." Her smile faltered just slightly, but she recovered quickly. "That sounds nice." I leaned in, my voice steady. They even talked about showcasing some of the wildlife footage they've captured, to really highlight the beauty of the area. For the first time, I saw it, a flicker of unease in her eyes. It was there for barely a second before she laughed lightly. "Well, I guess that makes sense. People love seeing animals in the wild." "Oh, I'm sure they do," I said, sipping my drink. "You never know what you might catch on camera." Amber shifted in her seat, but she didn't press further. Good. Let her sit with it. Let the doubt creep in. The next morning, I made my move. I went to the resort's event planner and pitched the idea of a wildlife awareness night. The resort had been eager to promote conservation, so it wasn't hard to convince them to set up an event with a big screen showcasing footage from the research cameras. A night for the guests, the staff, and even some of the locals to see the beauty of nature, completely free of charge. Amber had no clue. Later that evening, as we walked through the resort lobby, she noticed a large sign being placed near the entrance. "A look into nature, exclusive wildlife footage event. Tomorrow night." Her fingers tightened around my arm. "What's this?" "Oh," I said casually. "I guess they decided to do a big screening. Should be interesting." She swallowed. "And you think we should go?" "Of course," I said, tilting my head. "Why wouldn't we?" Amber forced a smile. "No reason." I could almost see the wheels turning in her mind, the growing fear that maybe, just maybe, she had been caught. That night, she was restless, checking her phone more than usual, glancing at me when she thought I wasn't looking. The doubt had set in. The tension was building. And tomorrow night, she would find out just how much I knew. The morning of the event, Amber was different. She was more distant, more cautious, like she was trying to read between the lines of my every word. I pretended not to notice. I wanted her to sit in that unease, let it twist into paranoia. Let her wonder what I knew, if I knew anything at all. "Are you sure we should go to this event tonight?" she asked as we had breakfast on the balcony. Her tone was light, but I could hear the calculation beneath it. "Why wouldn't we?" I asked, sipping my coffee. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing. Seeing nature captured like that, untouched, unfiltered. Don't you think that's fascinating?" Amber forced a smile. "Yeah, I guess so." She was nervous. Good. The day passed slowly, with Amber growing more fidgety as time dragged on. She kept checking her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, and at one point, she even made a call in hushed tones from the bathroom. I didn't need to hear her words to know what she was doing, scrambling for reassurance, for confirmation that her secret was still safe. It wasn't. By the time we walked into the resort's main event hall that evening, she was all but gripping my arm like a lifeline. The place was packed. Guests, resort staff, even a few locals had shown up for the screening. There was an excitement in the air, a buzz of anticipation. Amber scanned the room, her smile tight. "Wow, a lot of people came." "Of course," I said. "Who wouldn't want to see something this special?" She nodded but said nothing. We found our seats near the middle of the room, the large projector screen positioned at the front, waiting for the show to begin. I leaned back, perfectly relaxed, while Amber sat stiffly beside me, her fingers laced together so tightly that her knuckles were turning white. The resort owner took the stage and smiled warmly at the crowd. "Thank you all for joining us tonight. We've captured some incredible moments over the last few months, and we can't wait to share them with you." The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. It started innocently enough. Majestic shots of wildlife moving through the untouched forests, a mother bear leading her cubs along a riverbank, a mountain lion stretching lazily beneath the sun. The crowd murmured in appreciation, captivated by the raw beauty of nature. Then the footage changed. Amber's breath hitched. The camera feed switched to a new angle, a hidden motion-activated camera placed near a secluded hot spring. The audio was silent, but the imagery was clear. The bubbling water, the curling steam, and then movement. A woman stepping into the spring. Amber. And then the crowd gasped softly as the footage showed them together, their movements unmistakable, their familiarity undeniable. The intimacy in their body language left no room for doubt. I turned my head just slightly, enough to see Amber frozen in place, her entire body stiff as stone. Her mouth hung open, but no sound came out. The footage didn't play for long, just enough to ensure everyone in that room understood what they were seeing. Enough for whispers to start threading through the crowd. Enough for judgment to settle in. Then the screen went black. Silence. The resort owner cleared his throat awkwardly, clearly having not expected this turn of events. "Well," he said hesitantly, "it seems some visitors to the resort have been making use of the protected hot springs." A nervous chuckle rippled through the audience, but it was overshadowed by the heavy tension in the room. Every eye in the room was shifting, flicking between the screen and Amber. Recognition dawning. I slowly stood, stretching like I was simply preparing to leave. Then, in a calm voice that cut through the murmurs, I said, "Some things in life are meant to be preserved." I turned, leveling my gaze at Amber. "Some things just aren't." Amber snapped out of her paralysis. "Wait, no, this isn't," but I was already walking away. The whispers turned into a low hum of conversation as I left the event hall, my heart pounding, but my steps steady. Behind me, Amber scrambled after me, her voice rising, her panic evident. "David, wait. This isn't what it looks like." I stopped in the doorway and looked over my shoulder. "Amber," I said, my voice even. "It's exactly what it looks like." Then I walked out, leaving her to face the wreckage she had created. The night air was cold against my skin as I walked out of the event hall, but I barely felt it. Adrenaline surged through me, a strange mix of triumph and finality settling deep in my chest. It was done. Everyone had seen. There was no more pretending, no more lies. I had exposed the truth in front of a room full of people, and now Amber had to deal with the fallout. I reached the parking lot before I heard her footsteps pounding the pavement behind me. David. Her voice was sharp, desperate. David, stop. I didn't stop. I kept walking toward the car, my keys already in my hand. David, please, she shouted, her voice cracking now, no longer controlled, no longer calculated. She grabbed my arm, yanking me to a halt. You can't just walk away. I turned slowly, meeting her wide, frantic eyes. Can't I? Amber swallowed hard. Her face was pale under the parking lot lights, her hands trembling as she clutched at me like I was the last stable thing in her world. That wasn't what you think it was. Ryan was just showing me the hot spring. It was nothing, I swear. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Nothing? You expect me to believe that after what I just saw? After what everyone just saw? Her breath hitched, her fingers tightening on my sleeve. It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking. I was just caught up in the moment. Please, David, we can fix this. I pulled my arm free, shaking my head. No, Amber, we can't. Her eyes filled with tears. It didn't mean anything. You mean everything to me. You stop. My voice was firm, cutting through her desperate rambling. You don't get to rewrite this. You don't get to stand here and act like you're the victim when you made your choices. You lied to me. You betrayed me. And now you're embarrassed because everyone knows. That's what this is about, isn't it? You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. Tears streaked down her face now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret. Just a quiet, settled anger that had no room for second chances. David, she whispered, please. We've been through too much to end it like this. I exhaled slowly, looking at the woman I once thought I knew. The woman I had loved, trusted. And now, the woman I was leaving behind. It already ended. Amber, I said quietly. You just didn't realize it until now. She let out a broken sound, something between a sob and a gasp. What am I supposed to do? I stepped back, away from her grasp, and unlocked the car. That's not my problem anymore. I got in, started the engine, and pulled away, leaving Amber standing alone in the cold, the weight of her choices finally crashing down around her. The morning after the event, I woke up early, the weight of everything pressing down on me, but there was no hesitation in my actions. The night before had been a public reckoning, but today was about securing my future without Amber in it. The lawyer's office smelled of coffee and ink, the scent of bureaucracy and endings. I sat across from Michael, my attorney, a man with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, as he flipped through the thick file I had handed him. You're sure about this? He asked, glancing up at me. I nodded. Completely. He sighed, tapping his pen against the desk. With the evidence you provided, footage, text records, the financial statements showing her reckless spending, I'd say this is an open-end shut case. You'll have the upper hand in the divorce. Are you prepared for her reaction? I exhaled. She'll fight. She won't want to look like the villain. Michael smirked. She doesn't have a choice. The whole town saw the footage. Her reputation is already in flames. Later that afternoon, I sent Amber the divorce papers through a courier. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a dramatic fight. She had lost that privilege. The text I sent was simple. Check your mail. No explanations, no apologies. Within an hour, my phone rang. I didn't answer. Minutes later, she was banging on my apartment door. I let her knock, let her scream my name. Eventually, I opened it, keeping my expression unreadable. You filed for divorce? Her voice was shrill, her eyes wild. Yes. She let out a hollow laugh. That's it? You just decided, without even talking to me? I crossed my arms. You didn't talk to me before sneaking off with Ryan, did you? She flinched. It was a mistake. I told you that. You're just throwing away years of marriage over one bad decision. I tilted my head. You made that decision, Amber, and I'm making mine. Her breath came fast, her hands balling into fists. You humiliated me, David. You didn't have to do it like that. I leaned against the doorframe. You humiliated yourself. She ran a shaking hand through her hair. You think you're so righteous, so perfect, but you're not. You. I cut her off. I'm done, Amber. Tears filled her eyes, but I wasn't moved. Not anymore. I waited for her to say something, to beg, to fight. Instead, she whispered, I don't know what I'm going to do. I met her gaze calm, firm. Not my problem anymore. I shut the door in her face, locking it behind me. She stood outside for a while before finally walking away. I didn't watch her leave. I had more important things ahead of me. The silence that followed Amber's departure was heavy, but it wasn't suffocating. It was liberating. I stood there for a moment, listening to nothing but my own breathing, the ticking of the wall clock, the distant hum of the city outside. No more fights, no more lies, no more pretending. I was finally free. The weeks that followed were a mix of relief and adjustment. The legal process moved forward swiftly, thanks to Michael's meticulous preparation. Amber tried to fight for a better settlement, but her leverage was non-existent. Her affair, her recklessness, the undeniable evidence. I had played my cards right, and she had no choice but to fold. She moved out of our house and into a small rental on the other side of town, far from the life she had once flaunted. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding mine. Work became my escape, my therapy. I poured myself into new projects, finally feeling the drive I had lost in the turmoil of my marriage. Client said, promotions that once seemed out of reach were now within my grasp. My name carried weight again, not because of my personal life, but because of my work ethic, my results. It was empowering to know that I had survived the worst and come out sharper, stronger. Occasionally, I'd hear whispers about Amber, how she struggled to maintain the same social circle that once adored her, how Ryan had lost interest as soon as the thrill of sneaking around was gone, how she had shown up at a few local events, only to be met with awkward glances and half-hearted greetings. The sympathy she expected never came. The respect she once demanded had vanished. One evening, I ran into an old friend at a cafe. So, have you talked to her? He asked, stirring his coffee. I shook my head. No need. He smirked. You really left her in the dust, huh? I leaned back in my chair, sipping my drink. She made her choice. I made mine. And that was the truth. I had no interest in revisiting the past. My life was mine again, and for the first time in years, it felt like I was actually living it. As I walked home that night, I realized how much lighter I felt. The weight of betrayal, anger, and heartbreak had been replaced with something unfamiliar but welcome, peace. Months passed, and my life had settled into something I had forgotten was possible, peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from winning or proving a point. It was the kind that came from truly letting go, from knowing that I had survived the worst and had nothing left to fear. The mornings felt different now. No tension in the air, no walking on eggshells. I woke up and actually looked forward to the day ahead. My job, once overshadowed by my personal chaos, became something I thrived in. Promotions, new opportunities, respect from colleagues. It all came naturally when I wasn't dragging dead weight behind me. The best part, though, was the time I got to rediscover myself. I started running again, something I had abandoned in the later years of my marriage. I signed up for a marathon, trained every morning, feeling my body and mind grow stronger with each mile. I reconnected with old friends, people Amber had subtly pushed out of my life. And I traveled. No compromises, no one complaining about my itinerary, just me and the open road, finding new places, new stories, and a new version of myself. Meanwhile, Amber's life had taken a much different turn. Ryan had disappeared from the picture within weeks, leaving her exactly where she deserved to be, alone. The social circles that once fawned over her had moved on, uninterested in the woman whose scandal had become old news. She had tried to reach out to mutual friends, spinning her own version of events, but no one bought it. I ran into her once, unexpectedly. A grocery store of all places. She looked different, tired, hollow, the spark she once carried dimmed by reality. She spotted me before I could turn away. Michael, she said hesitantly, forcing a smile. I nodded. Amber. A pause. A long, heavy silence between us, filled with things she probably wanted to say, but knew wouldn't change anything. You look good, she finally said, and I knew it wasn't just small talk. She meant it. Thanks, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Another pause. Then she let out a short, humorless laugh. I guess you got what you wanted. A fresh start. I met her gaze, unshaken. I didn't want a fresh start. I wanted a life where I didn't have to second-guess the person I trusted the most. You made sure I didn't have that choice anymore. Her expression faltered. She looked down, nodding slowly. I messed up. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. No amount of regret could undo what she did. And I had no desire to offer her comfort. Not anymore. I walked away without looking back, stepping out into the crisp afternoon air, breathing in the reality of my new life. In the end, I had lost a marriage, but I had gained something far more valuable: freedom. I was no longer a man trapped in the shadow of someone else's choices. I was my own person again, and for the first time in years, the future was mine to shape. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.